Hi everybody, my name is Green Leader, and today I'm going to cover some interesting news from the FTC. All of my videos so far have been largely on the FTC hearings, but in my opinion that is kind of the most interesting thing going on right now in the video game industry, and so might as well be covering it. So we finally got a ruling on the FTC preliminary hearing. I didn't actually realize this was just a preliminary hearing, but apparently it is. And the judge ruled in favor of Microsoft. The judge decided to essentially tell the FTC that their arguments weren't good enough to show that they were anti-competition, and they just have to deal with it. This comes to us from The Verge. Tom Warren writing again about this, covering this quite excellently, where really explaining the statements coming from Judge Corley. So Judge Corley said in her statement, Microsoft's acquisition of Activision has been described as the largest in tech history. It deserves scrutiny. That scrutiny, and to be fair, I think she's right on that. That scrutiny has paid off. Microsoft has committed in writing, in public, and in court to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation for 10 years on parity with the Xbox. It made an agreement with Nintendo to bring Call of Duty to the Switch, and it entered several agreements to, for the first time, bring Activision's content to several cloud gaming services. This court's responsibility in this case is narrow. It is to decide if, notwithstanding these current circumstances, the merger should be halted, perhaps even terminated, pending resolution of the FTC administrative action. For the reasons explained, the court finds the FTC has not shown a likelihood it will prevail on its claim this particularly vertical merger in this specific industry may substantially lessen competition. It won't. To the contrary, the record evidence points to more consumer access to Call of Duty and other Activision content. The motion for a preliminary injunction is therefore denied. I think this is actually pretty cool, largely for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think the FTC is largely overstepping their bounds here. Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard, I do not believe for a second is going to somehow hurt competition, particularly as it's really, this doesn't even go to what the FTC was originally created for, which was really to prevent a full-on monopoly where a single company owns every stage of production and can prevent other competitors from even getting access to like the basic essentials for them to run their company, right? Microsoft buying Activision is not going to prevent Sony from getting access to any other developers or any other access to networks or anything like that, which is why I think this whole case seems kind of ridiculous. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't any potential argument for the acquisition of Activision to be somehow anti-competitive, but the FTC certainly didn't make it. They made arguably one of the dumbest arguments against this, and particularly as every single argument they made against Microsoft, Sony is already doing and has been doing for a very long time. So I just think it's absolutely ridiculous that they even brought this thing to court in the first place. So that's why I say I do think it is correct for the judge to say it does deserve scrutiny. I think the judge is correct to say that. However, the scrutiny that the FTC decided to bring was just nonsensical. But that's not all we got from this. So not long after this ruling came down, Microsoft decided to announce that it's going to no longer worry about trying to appease the CMA. Or maybe they are. I think I may have misread that initially. But essentially, they're going to remove their appeal from the CMA and just worry about getting into negotiations to finish up the acquisition for Activision and try and work with the CMA to go through with it without having to worry about being blocked by the CMA, right? So this came out from Microsoft Vice Chair and President Brad Smith. He said that he's not going to be worrying about trying to deal with the appeal, as the two parties will instead attempt to negotiate a deal that satisfies both. From Brad Smith. After today's court decision in the US, our focus now turns back to the UK. While we ultimately disagree with the CMA's concerns, which, yeah, so do I, we are considering how the transaction might be modified in order to address those concerns in a way that is acceptable to the CMA. In order to prioritize work on these proposals, Microsoft and Activision have agreed with the CMA that a stay of the litigation in the UK would be in the public interest, and that the parties have made a joint submission to the Competition Appeal Tribunal to this effect. So essentially what he's saying here is that we're going to remove the appeal. We're not going to bother with it. It's really not in our best interest, particularly as the actual court date for the appeal is after the 18th, which is when the actual deadline for the acquisition has to take place, right? And I believe if they miss that deadline, Microsoft will have to pay an additional like $2 to $3 billion if they do, which means that they really have zero incentive to try and really worry about that. And even if for whatever reason CMA still tries to block them, I think at this point, Microsoft really doesn't care, because I don't think the UK is actually as big of a market share as the US. I think Microsoft and Activision really cared a whole lot more about the US market and their potential block via the FTC than the UK, because as much as the UK represents a decent chunk of the market for them, it's not like the majority of their market share. And let's be honest, they could certainly work around that if they need to. But like their major chunk is in the US, so once they've crossed that hurdle of the FTC, they're going to just close up the deal there and be able to merge, and then not really worry that much if they can't get negotiations through with the CMA. At least that's my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I mean, ultimately, if worse comes to worse, they may just essentially no longer be putting the Activision games or putting out Microsoft games in the UK market. Worst comes to worst. I think that's the worst case situation. I don't think that's necessarily what's going to happen. I think what's more likely going to happen is that the CMA and Microsoft will come to some sort of deal that will, essentially assuage. I'm not even sure if that's the right word. But it'll essentially make the CMA feel happy about the deal, and they can move on with their lives, right? But that's not all. Well, that's not all. The FTC decided to try and come back and appeal the decision. So this comes to us from CBS News. By the way, the last one being from Game Informer. But CBS News reported today that the FTC tried to put in a request to appeal the judge's ruling in the case from Wednesday. So apparently, in court filings Wednesday, the FTC said it was appealing Corley's decision to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. However, in an order issued Thursday, Corley denied the FTC's motion to put Microsoft's purchase of Activision, maker of the popular Call of Duty series, on hold while the appeal moves forward. So essentially, they try to block them again by saying, oh, we're going to put forward an appeal, and then this appeal is going to essentially try and block the merger as well. And Judge Corley's like, nah, you can't do that. You can put forward an appeal, but that's not going to block them from being able to close the deal. So I think the FTC has essentially been somewhat thwarted again, particularly as if they're going to argue the same arguments in the appeal, I don't think they're going to get anywhere. And I don't even know if the Ninth Circuit will essentially say, nah, Judge Corley was right in the first place. We're not even going to listen to your arguments. We're just going to agree with her. So I think it's just kind of hilarious, and certainly makes my night to see the FTC, already a bloated federal government organization who's trying to stamp their authority on American business for kicks and giggles, essentially, because, like, as I said, their arguments were nonsensical. So, yeah. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think that the FTC will be able to actually get their appeal up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals? And do you think that they'll ultimately be able to block the merger with that appeal? Also, do you guys think that the CMA and Microsoft will be able to actually work out a deal to be able to close their merger and continue to operate in the UK? Or do you think that Microsoft will ultimately end up pulling out all of their games, as well as Activision, from the UK market? Also, do you think that there actually is a legitimate argument to be made that Microsoft buying Activision is actually anti-competitive, or do you think that there really is no issue with it? I'd love to hear what you guys think. But if you guys have made it this far into the video, please consider hitting that like button and potentially subscribing. And until next time, this is Green Leader, signing out.